Yo, so the aim of today is pocket watching. We hear a lot about how wealthy these servants are, but how rich are they really? And this is a convo that came over from the court from my guy Egg. He says, bar Gilgamesh, who would be the next richest guy? By the way, if you haven't already, make sure you guys sign up for the Patreon. You get access to early content and priority on your requests. So since we're going to be addressing the heavy hitters, you know the first thing that we have to do, push through some of the servants that at the very least have the skill golden rule. And as you know, golden rule is essentially the skill that embodies your ability to acquire wealth in the first place. And not everybody has this, whether they're rich or not. There's several different variations of the skill, but you're probably gonna be familiar with the people that come in mind. Kings, travelers, anyone that you would have expected to run into that type of funding. The first, of course, with the rank A in pretty much every iteration that he has, Gilgamesh. It says, being fated, a life that is filled with riches. He can live as a millionaire. Gilgamesh lives the life of a nabob and has no money troubles for the entirety of his life. In the legend, he claimed all the world's treasures as his own and is said to have infinite wealth in his golden capital. The originals of the noble phantasms preserved in his treasury were collected during that period. Although this ability seems unrelated to battle, it plays a great role in arming Gilgamesh. And we all knew this to be the case before all the other different fates started to pop off. You got this dude walking around with this full set of gilded body armor. His very presence just exudes rich, even standing next to the wealthiest of people. But I want to get this out the way first to say that Gilgamesh, his position is definitive until we prove it otherwise, which probably couldn't be the case. Even right here, it tells you that his wealth in verse is infinite, meaning that not only is he the richest servant in fate, but due to the nature of the way that the Gate of Babylon works and the way that his background works, he will always be the richest servant because his riches are conceptually driven. In the Gate of Babylon itself, the treasures are never ending. The riches are never ending. The resources are never ending. So you technically can't outrich Gilgamesh if you're going by the actual lore. And this is the spin that I wanted to put on it. What I wanted to do is go back into the actual myth and see how rich everybody really is, because as we know, a lot of what fate has done here is exaggerated, not in a bad way. It's just, even in the Epic of Gilgamesh itself, we know Gilgamesh is rich, of course, but it never went into exact details of what that quote-unquote rich exactly is. Rich can mean a lot of things. So to go back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, you have the instance where Ishtar pulled up on him and essentially offered her hand. She offered him praise, she tried to give him presents, she wanted him to wife her up, and he hit her with the thought, be gone. Can't hate the player, gotta hate the game. A princess Ishtar raised her eyes to the beauty of Gilgamesh. Come along, Gilgamesh, be you my husband. To me, grant your lusciousness. Be you my husband, and I will be your wife. I will have harnessed for you a chariot of lapis lazuli in gold, and wheels of gold and horns of electrum, and it will be harnessed with great storming mountain mules. Now, lapis lazuli was one of the most precious gems that they had, one of the most precious resources that they had. And you know, gold is still highly valued today. So she's already offering him a ton of money just as a gift, as a way to entice him, so to speak. And then you even have the horns of electrum, which would add on to the pool from before. Mind you that Gilgamesh turned all of this down. We are not hurting for bread. So to see that she offered a whole chariot full of all of these precious resources and he said no, kind of sets the standard for how much he already has to begin with, just beyond him not wanting to be with her in general. And then if you go further down in the same tablet, because of course when he turned her down, that's where him and Enkidu ended up fighting against Gugulana. They beat Gugulana, and in order to celebrate, Gil decides to bring his craftsmen in and decorate the horns to hang it up on the wall. Gilgamesh summoned all the artisans and craftsmen. All the artisans admired the thickness of its horns, each fashioned from 30 minas of lapis lazuli. 2 fingers thick is their casing, 6 vats of oil the contents of the 2. He gave its ointment to his personal god, Lugobanda. He brought the horns in and hung them in the bedroom of the family head. So this time around, they're actually putting a number to it. 30 minas is more so of an ancient measurement, which in this case would be more than a pound. An ancient Near Eastern unit of weight for silver or gold, equivalent to approximately 1.25 pounds. Okay, we got the number. How much is the lazuli? Well, if we look at it modern day, it says high quality lazuli, because there are different grades, go for 25,000 per ounce if you highball it. So for the sake of the video, that's the one that we're gonna run with. We're gonna highball it. So that will be $25,000 times 20 ounces, because it did say 1.25. That means one mina, just one mina, would be $500,000. Now remember, it told us that he put 30 minas in each horn. So that 500,000 times 30 apiece means that it's 15 million per horn, and this is just for decoration. This was only for him celebrating his win. That doesn't include what he paid the craftsmen to put this all together, or any additional costs that it took to make it 30 million modern day. Just hang it. Then you still gotta add in the 6 vats of oil. When they did the offerings, he would give up a lot of gold and lazuli. He did the same thing when he made his offering for Enkidu after he passed away, and he made the statue. If you look up the average gold price, 2,300 an ounce. Again, 20 ounces would make that 46,000 for one mina. That doesn't include his domain, all the land that he had from Uruk and beyond, which would be the greater half of the money in general. And not only that, but I mean, location plays a huge part in this too. You're smack dab in the Middle East, which is known for having hella resources. It's only right. You blacksmith, you lapidary, you coppersmith, you goldsmith, you jeweler, create my friend, fashion a statue of him. He fashioned the statue of his friend. His features, your chest will be lapis lazuli and your skin will be of gold. You can just imagine how much wealth he put into creating the statue of Enkidu, especially when he had already said that the amount that he would put into it would know no bounds. I will fashion a statue of you of gold without measure. That doesn't include the money itself and the rest of their resources. Before his death, you had Enkidu mention that he gathered 10 leagues worth of cedar wood to create the door as a means of worship for the sky god Enlil. So you have to account for all the money that will be put into the construction of that and the wood as well. He mentioned that the chest area of the statue will be lazuli and everything else will be gold. So let's say the statue is 90% gold, 10% lazuli. This could be as subtle as a Greek statue, or it could be as big as the Statue of Liberty, which is around 300 feet tall if you include the framework and all. And you have to account for the construction and all that went into that. So again, let's go high with it. Let's use the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty cost $250,000 to make back in 1880, and it's comprised of gold, copper, iron, and steel. The Enkidu statue will be all gold and lazuli. Well, what does that 200,000 mean today? $5 million. If we were to run the same info and swap out the material of the entire statue for majority gold, you're looking at something ridiculous. Modern day, just last year, China bought 225 tons of gold valued at 13 billion. This will be less considering that the Enkidu statue wasn't exactly as tall or as wide, but you get the idea. So if the statue is the actual highball and not just a Greek statue or something of that nature, then he's even richer than we thought. And that's just the statue. By the way, that cedar door was said to have been around 120 feet tall and 23 feet wide, just based off the converted dimensions that they've given us. So if they're willing to make a door that tall, the same can be said about the statue. Cedar, agate, more lazuli, all these different gems, carnelian, rubies, hematite. all of the treasures that he actually had, the weaponry, everything that he discovered before and after his journey, the whole nine. You have Toyotomi Hideyoshi, one of the subordinates of Nobunaga, who started as a peasant and then rose all the way up to one of the greatest of the noble classes and became one of the three great unifiers of Japan. I know Fate doesn't give him much coverage, but he does exist in one of the older works. He has A rank golden rule. He is a transcending of all the new golden riches and is said to have collected all the gold of Japan. The literal rag to riches timeline. One of the things that he had created was the Great Buddha of Kyoto, which was yet another huge statue made entirely of gold. And out of all the giant Buddha statues, the one that he had created was the biggest one. While the famous Kyoto Daibutsu, 24 meters, was entirely destroyed in a fire, and it's had multiple reconstructions from the time that it was first built, between the fire, between the earthquakes, and the consistent damages. So you're looking at a nearly 80-foot statue made entirely of gold that's also wide too. And given a nod to his Fate counterpart, not only was Hideyoshi breaded up, but he's also described to have been on a building frenzy. He was throwing several things up, including multiple castles around an 80-foot statue, same concept as the Enkidu statue. It would just be once again smaller in size. So the 13 billion from before, it's fair to say we can cut that down about 60%, and that statue was still valued at around 4 billion. I'm trying to get like them. And as for his castles, and we'll just use the Osaka castle as an example, this is some elite pocket watching, by the way. So we're gonna run the numbers on the castle. Now we all know there's a lot of variables here, the size, the materials used, so on and so forth, but we're just gonna go on an average basis. What's the size of the castle? We come up with 15 acres. The castle grounds, which cover approximately 61,000 square meters, or in other words, 15 acres. What does that mean now? For 2023, a new castle's construction ranges from 525 per square feet to 700 square feet for a complete finished castle. If we take the 700 square feet, if you look at the 15 acres, that's 650,000 square feet times that against the 700, and that's what you come up with for just one castle, 457 million. And Hideyoshi is said to have built 4 of them. Toyotomi Hideyoshi built a grand total of 4 castles throughout Japan, along with a few small defenses with walls and moats. Hideyoshi built the Tsunomata Castle, the Himeji Castle, the Osaka Castle, as we just mentioned, and the Momoyama Castle. The Himeji Castle is the largest castle in Japan. It's even bigger than Osaka, 576 acres to be exact. So not only is it bigger, but it's nearly 40 times bigger, which would mean that the price will be 40 times as much as Osaka, generally speaking, which is insane. And Osaka was already 457 million. So we take that number times the 38, in actual numbers, we come up with 17 billion just for that one castle. Just for that one castle. Yeah, the people's taxes are going to good places, I tell you what. And that's not even looking at the other 2 or everything else that was built under him, the resources, so on and so forth. So yes, we need my man to get his proper desserts. I need him to be fitted with the all gold, just like Gil. Golden robes, whatever you gotta do. Moving on to the next one. And this is one of my favorites because it's one of my favorite characters, of course. Edmond Dantes. A lot of people don't know about this. Part of the narrative for the story of Count of Monte Cristo, which he was the main character of, was that Edmond found a treasure that made him ridiculously rich. The Count of Monte Cristo treasure. The treasure that Faria told him about when he was set up and thrown into prison wrongly. He breaks out of the prison, and later on in the story, he actually finds the treasure, which Fate does take into account considering his A rank golden rule. It says money is not a trouble to the Count of Monte Cristo, who obtained the hidden treasure that the priest Faria told him about when he was in Chateau d'If, granting him everlasting wealth and political power, and especially especially considering the come up and how the story goes down. You're happy to see it for my boy. But how much is this money exactly? So check this out. The best guesstimate that literature and economic historians have, our beloved count was worth somewhere around 300 million francs. If we take a trip down the economic memory lane, 1 franc in the 19th century was roughly 1/5 of a gram of gold. That means that the count was sitting on 60,000 kilograms of gold. Translation, 132,000 pounds, or 65 pure tons of gold. That's only the treasure, using the same quote from China buying the 225 tons of gold, and that ended up being 13 billion. Well, all we would have to do is take 1/4 of that, and you pretty much have around what Edmund would have on his dolly, which is at least $3 billion. And that's just him. That's not a government, that's not a body of people. That's just him, and that's just the treasure. Please do not bring the money talk up with my boy Edmund. It will end bad for you. Another person that has golden rule, Siegfried, because of the treasure that he got from Fafnir. Now granted, his golden rule isn't as high as the others, it's at a C rank, but it's still worth noting. Due to the cursed Nibelung treasure, promising him a lifetime untroubled by money, he has this skill, but at the cost of his luck being ranked down. Now unfortunately, unlike the others, there aren't many direct numbers that we can use to play with, but we do know that he has an entire phantasm that centers around the fact of him having this wealth. His Rheingold phantasm. Siegfried gained the treasure hoard from defeating Fafnir. He claims that the amount was exaggerated, but he also says it was still enough for some to be left even by the time his great-grandson was an old man. During his interlude, it is accidentally summoned in the Grand Orders after he beats a resurrected Fafnir, and he asks Ritsuka to help him find it. If the treasure is allowed to flow freely, the humans who find it will become prisoners of the great wealth, eventually causing much destruction as the country is filled with betrayal and distrust. Right he is about that one. And to take this a step further, if you look at his voice lines, the Rheingold, the accursed treasure, I had heard from a while ago that it is now in the possession of the alchemist hailing from Germany. If I am not mistaken, the name is Einsburn. It would be great if no curse had befallen to them yet. So not only is this true, but we know that in the main canon, the Einsburn took Siegfried's money. What type of Sumanai is this? Give me my paperback. And get this, they used the gold to make their Holy Grail vessel, which they've had countless amount of. All of that at the expense of Siegfried's treasure. Back in the Fate route, in a conversation with Kire, the Einsburn, you mean Ilya's family? Yes, the Einsburn specialized in the golden rule of the line, or in other words, Siegfried's gold. They were best suited to make an imitation of the Holy Grail. If you look at the materials, it tells you up front, the Holy Grail in Fate Stay Night was not the original, but a replica that carried the function of a wish-granting machine. One of the many replicas created with my money. Y'all got some nerve. At least it's getting put to use, I guess. And then way earlier in that same route, it's mentioned that 726 grails had been solidified up until that point in time. The church bears the duty to recover the holy relics, as we are the lowest of the special agencies. Originally, it was our goal to research and recover the Holy Cross, but here we have a duty to investigate the Holy Grail. We have to investigate the 726th grail that has appeared in this far eastern land. We must recover it if it is real and dispute it if it is not. 726, that many grails? Who knows? It just means that there have been at least that many things that seem like one. And so we know that the Einsburns have made a great contribution to many of those artifacts. So since we don't have any actual numbers, let's just throw something out there. Let's say at least 50% of those artifacts were created from Siegfried's treasure. So like 350 fake grails. Well, if you look up a golden Catholic chalice, and this is actually brass, but it's gold plated, you can find some around 3,000 each. So just for that amount, that's already over $1 million, which would sit very nicely with his statement of it's a generous amount, but it's not that much, and it would last into the next few generations. And $1 million sounds exactly like that, right? Because if you live a modest lifestyle and you do what you're supposed to, that will send you the way. But if you're irresponsible, you live above your means. I've seen people fuck $1 million. million up. So he's not lying. Not only that, but you gotta think, it's even better for him because he gets to keep it all. Man, you do something like this over in the States, say you win the lotto, man, they gonna tax you for half of it before you get it. They gonna tell everybody that you won the lotto. They gonna try to have you on video footage. They gonna try to get you to give a statement. They gonna show people where you live, give them your social security number. Get the fuck on. I'm leaving the country. And it's the same thing for him too, right? Yes, everybody knows that Siegfried acquired the treasure, but nobody would know exactly who Siegfried is. And there's no cameras or anything like that back then to prove as such. So it'd be a lot harder to track somebody like that down. If you look up the average amount an American spends over their lifetime, and I know what we do shouldn't be the standard because we're out here doing whatever, but the average American spends 3.3 million over their lifetime. And this statement is from this year, so it's relative. Could you guys really hold all that into the next generations? Because I've seen a lot of people say that they could, and once they get it, it's a whole different story. Now, one last person that I had to get into is none other than your boy Ozzy, or in other words, Ramses II, the same pharaoh that's credited with building more structures than any other pharaoh to have ever existed. But can we truly put a number to this? The wealth of Ramses II's reign is evident in his opulent building campaign, the largest undertaken by any pharaoh. The temples at Karnak and Abu Simbel are among Egypt's greatest wonders. Ramses II constructed the temples at Abu Simbel, the hall at Karnak, the complex at Abydos, the Ramesseum at Thebes, which is literally his phantasm in verse, and hundreds of other buildings, monuments, and temples. Many historians consider his reign the pinnacle of Egyptian art and culture. And mind you that Ozzy doesn't even have the golden rule skill, just to showcase that not everybody is going to have the same loadout. So if we just use Ozzy's Karnak temple, for example, 200 acres, said to be the largest religious site in the world, and it was made with sandstone, limestone, and red granite. Of course, we don't know the exact portions, but considering the pricing of the material and similar things of its nature, well, what's the ratio? Limestone and sandstone were the main building stones of ancient Egypt. So we consider these two the greater half and granite the lesser, and this is about to be a crazy reach. If we use the pyramids of Giza, which are constructed with limestone, mortar, and granite, just one of them was 13 acres. And if we look at the cost, modern day, the estimated cost for constructing a modern Great Pyramid could range from 250 million to 300 million, covering concrete, labor, design costs, and other expenses. So if we say that the whole 200 acres is filled for Karnak, which we know it's not, but let's just say it is, we take that 13 acres into that 200, which is 15, times that against the 300 million, and you're looking at $4 billion just for the Karnak temple alone. And as we already mentioned before, it said that he built over 100 structures at least. But we already knew this. Ozzy even carries himself pretty much in the same way as Gilgamesh, just exuding wealth. Instead of having the armor, his shine more so comes in the form of his Ramesseum, where he just drops an entire pyramid out of nowhere, among other things. So yeah, this was fun. And now that we've done this, we might have to circle back and get more classes in, maybe the middle class, maybe get some of the broke servants in. Who's the real brokies? Because they just like me for real. I do have a couple in mind already. Again, all of this is exaggerated, of course, and all of it is just crazy to think about when you actually try to put a face to these numbers instead of just saying quote unquote rich or wealthy. Didn't get around to people like Solomon, and honestly it's kind of useless to say considering that we know he had riches blessed by God, so his pool was pretty much infinite by law. And if you want to be real about it, Gilgamesh basically took his shit, if anything.